you go. I do like how Zoom has changed that and it kind of announces it. Didn't used to do that. And then I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to do like just a really brief overview of the organization. Then I will hand it to you, Randy.
Thanks.
Let's see. There we go. Can everybody see my screen okay? All right. All right. So of course, we've got our Friday workshops going on. We do them every other Friday from 12 to 1. Of course, the topic today is talent development is an ongoing discussion, which of course we know that is. Just before we were just talking about even this workshop, we were just talking about talent and how that's always kind of a constant process, constant discussion. So I think this is really timely and perfect. And of course, with Randall or Randy Deich, the Chief Networking Officer at Regenerate Tech, which is an awesome new startup that I think everybody should check out because they do a lot within the talent development workforce space and building a really cool platform now that is for students by students. So I will let you kind of tell everybody a little bit more about that, Randy, but just wanted to give you a shout out there. And Tech Hub South Florida. So our mission and vision statement basically is building South Florida's tech hub. That is our overall mission. We do want to make sure that we are very inclusive. We bring everybody to the table. Everybody should feel, welcome and invited. And our community creed, Tech Hub South Florida, is wholeheartedly committed to building a welcoming, collaborative, and inclusive community for all. We put inclusivity first, engage with others,
We just started.
all, and don't sell to people. Oh, sorry. What did you say, Mike?
That wasn't me, that was Kumar.
Oh, did you say something, Kumar? I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I muted myself. I was talking someone
Oh,
else.
okay, no problem. No problem.
Okay, well then.
All right, and Tech Hub South Florida. So we are a tech nonprofit. We are membership driven, so corporate membership driven. We've got about 200 corporate members from Miami-Dade through Martin County. And our purpose is to foster a community of technology, innovation, and creativity within the region or within South Florida. With that said, we do have smaller startups, seed stage, even pre-revenue companies, all the way through much larger enterprise companies like your Office Depots, UKGs, Social Mobile, Carrier, and so on. I'm actually sitting in one of the spaces today. Boca Code is a new startup coding school. So again, shout out to them for letting us use their space. And a little bit about our membership. I won't go into detail with this, but we do have individual memberships and corporate memberships. Our memberships, at least on a corporate level, do give access to member profiles, exclusive member events, speaking opportunities, really just helping you get visibility and create yourself as a thought leader in the community in South Florida. And I don't know why it's not letting me go to the next screen. Zoom does this to me sometimes. Let me try and reshare. And if it doesn't let me, then I'm just going to do it off of the presentation mode. Nope, still not letting me. All right, so let me do it this way. Sorry, I don't know why it does this to me once in a while. Like I need, kind of funny enough, I need a tech person to tell me why it does that. I'm trying to figure it out. All right, so hopefully you guys can still see this. I'm just gonna do it this way versus being in presentation mode. All right, so next screen here. So we've got all of our events. So right now our tech talks are every other Monday evenings. We've actually brought them, we were doing them virtual, and now we're actually getting them back to in person. The next one is actually upcoming on Monday night. We have digital resource that's going to be presenting in general provision, so in downtown Fort Lauderdale. Our community coffees, which are panel discussions, we alternate them on Tuesday mornings at 8 a.m. The panel discussions, unlike the tech talks, because they're typically more technical, the community coffees can be around culture, around talent, they can be technical, it can be a little bit of everything. They alternate with our podcasts, which also happen on Tuesday mornings at 8 a.m. Podcasts, we highlight business leaders, startup leaders, the funding community, of course, technology as well. And we do repost us on podcast listening platforms, but then also YouTube for those that don't typically listen to a podcast platform. And then last but not least, of course, we have our lunch and learns or our workshops like today, each and every Friday from 12 to 1. And resume distributor. So for anybody that's looking for a job, we do have a job board on our website under talent. But then the resume distributor, you can actually create a simple little profile, upload your resume, and once you hit submit, it goes to all of our corporate members at once to get your resume in their hands immediately. So that's a really good tool to have. And last screen here. So we do have a really active Slack channel. There's about 4,500 members. It's techhubsouthflorida.org/Slack. And if you'd actually like to be added to our e-newsletter that goes out every Monday afternoon, you can actually just text us your email. And that number is 561-250-7206. And I'm going to go ahead and thank you for being patient through that, as Zoom wasn't being my friend that day. But I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you, Randy, if you'd like to introduce yourself, tell us about Regenerate Tech, and then whenever you are ready, you can go ahead and share your screen and go into your presentation.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate the invite to come and talk about talent development. And as you mentioned, my name is Randall Deich. Friends call me Randy, and I'm an educator in the school board of Broward County. This is year 29. But for the past 8 years, I've been really focused on providing skill opportunities for high school students in order to prepare them for entry-level positions, because our underserved students don't have the same experiences and resources as other groups do. So we started our nonprofit that partners with industry. We've partnered with Oracle. This is for year 7 with Oracle, and we're starting a new partnership with our volunteers at Microsoft and our work on providing skills that lead to the jobs that are currently at those industry locations. It is a grow your own model at Regenerate Tech. And this is so today's conversation is about talent development that kind of adopts this same habit of mind of grow your own. We do this at Regen, and we've been doing it I've been doing it in the realm of Broward County when going back of over 20 years. And so I'll take you on a little story of what we're doing now, and then we'll take a little trip of what we've done and where we can go and what you can do now, as we've talked earlier, to have this tangible playbook. So the best practices, the things that are excellent that your organization is doing, is constantly carried over, and they don't disappear when people leave. So let me share my screen. And I do encourage folks to just interrupt me, if that's okay. I'm not sure I'll be able to see the chat, and I'm sure you can see my screen at this point.
And I can watch chat for you, Randy.
Okay. All right. And the whole point is that, like the title says, when this is part of what you do, it is that habit of mind of developing your talents embedded in the work. You're constantly growing your own internal workforce. It is not an action on what do we do now. The idea is that if you have quality, if you're doing great work internally, well, we want to perpetuate and keep completing great work. I always laugh, of like that we have to find talent. And I'm thinking, well, you didn't know that gap exists. You didn't know that you have attrition rates, or whether it's retirements or changing. And usually it's never a surprise that you have workforce droppage. So it's always a reaction of we have to find. I'm like, why didn't you plan ahead? So let's take a look at, and see if I can, yep, I can move. So when you have this habit of mind, when you walk into an organization that's effective, you see the moving parts are constantly, it's not just about the work, but you're seeing there's communication. You're seeing that people come to work, they're inspired, they're motivated. It is an organization that you feel that you have opportunities, not just professionally, but personally are being satisfied. You have not just the work, but you have, what am I doing as our value system in our organization? Are those communicated effectively? How are we, what is our customer outreach, our community involvement? And when you have a plan of growing your own, and what we've done at Regenerate Tech, and what you see a picture here is we look at our career readiness at the high school level. And by all means, I'm not a huge fan of like, all right, then you got to get them at the middle school level, and then elementary level, because it's not very concrete and abstract. It's very abstract. But for our high school students, one of the major problems that exists is this disconnection. So what we try to do at Regenerate Tech is like I mentioned earlier, is we partner with our industry leaders to provide experiences, not just about the skills, but the acculturation of the organization, how they do their work. So the year one student who's been in a Grow Your Own program, there's no vetting on whether or not they've met the obligations and needs of the organization, because their mentors, their coaches have been part of the organization. Right now, when you hire somebody, the first thing you have to do is you put them on a probationary period to determine whether or not they have not just the knowledge and skills, because that you can train. You're doing probationary period for attitude and aspirations. You hire attitude and aspirations. You build up the knowledge and skills. So our conversation with our partner with Oracle, developing employees, is Grow Your Own, is what you see here is what our students experience as they're learning. And this is the the dotted lines that you want to see that exist, that our students aren't just learning knowledge and skills. These are future leaders of the organization. And this is somebody that this is how Oracle does their work. This is what we model, that as an Oracle employee, you're going to have the competence and skills for these things, that you're going to present, you're going to enter competitions, you're going to work with your community, you're going to pass on the knowledge to others. And this is what our students are learning. This is what's expected. So it's the warm and soft skills that occur. And as a result, when you focus on the work, what happens is that the organization recognizes that this Grow Your Own model has value, and Oracle has aspirations to take this coast to coast and have expands to expand. We put on our brakes and said, hold off, let's expand in the South Florida area first, and then we'll cross state lines. And these are some of our students, right before 2020 and our disruption, is all of these students now are currently in school, applying what they've learned in our Grow Your Own model, and some are actually close to graduating from college, that is, and they have experience in leadership and computer science, and their day one is completely different than anyone else's day one. They've had 4 years of working with us while they were in high school, being mentored by our Oracle and industry leaders. And here's the big deal. Here's like my favorite, the icing on the cake is this simple picture here is a slide that was used by Oracle to train their employees on LampStack. And you don't ask me what LampStack is, because I'm not the architect. So the Oracle trainer is using this presentation that was put together by one of our students. And so when I wrap my head around the fact that one of our high school, and when he put this together, he was a high school graduate, he's a freshman in college, put together this presentation and is now being delivered to Oracle employees. And she makes sure that that is shared with the participants. Trayvon, who put this together, he already has a seat. Right? What he's doing now is just getting the credentials he needs to make it permanent. Trey's way cool, by the way. But the big issue is when you hire an employee, do they have the same expectations as somebody who's been there as a veteran? And I know that there could be systems of support, there could be mentoring that's involved, but when it comes to an evaluation, and there could be a probationary period, are they expected at a high level? And if they are, how do they get there? What are their resources? What is their support? How do they know where to find things? And if all of this is not articulated in some concrete document, this binder, this tangible playbook, I don't know how it can get done. And I talk about my profession in teaching. A new educator has support systems in place, but rubber hits the road in the classroom. That person is in there all by themselves, making decisions all by themselves with zero experience. And you have to ask yourself, if we're any employee in your organization and you've hired him because you believe him or her, you believe in this person, that they had the right attitude and aspirations, are you providing conditions for success and failure? You know, and if you have a company who has this weeding out period, kind of makes me wonder why they hired him in the first place. Seems like a lot of energy being put into practices just to have somebody leave. It doesn't make sense. So a grow your own model, if you want to look at this picture, if you notice that gentleman on the right, that's me. This is around 1998, back in the classroom. And this is when I first started applying this habit of mind of there has to be a new innovative way of skilling employees. And at this point, you know, we're looking 20 years into the profession, realizing there new educators are not prepared, and was very fortunate to write a grant that was for our district that provided a year-long internship. So I brought Grow Your Own to Broward County High School, and you see over on the left, that second arrow, that's Farrah Bowes. She was our first year-long intern, paid intern for Broward County. So instead of a very tiny 8-week window of full ownership in the classroom, we're able to provide an entire year. We can experience the seasons of an experience, from opening bell to closing bell, from August to June, which is completely unique and different, because the idea is create a situation where they'll love the work, they feel supported, and they'll want to come back. Because the work conditions is what's going to keep folks in the organization. So here's the definition of induction, which I can't take ownership for it. This habit, this components and came about from a wonderful time with Phil Schlechte and the Schlechte Institute. And induction, you know, is those practices that are in place in the organization, where you have those transference of those expectations, the behaviors and knowledge, the skills, the how we do things. That's all part of the work. And you either have an effective induction system or you don't. And we call them systems because there's many parts to it. And here's the components. Mike, you mentioned earlier in our pre-conversation, you said you had your mission, your vision, and you had something else. Wasn't values, I believe it was another component.
At a high level strategic statement above that sits above mission and vision. I
How
have
is
a
it-
value statement, but the strategic is not as tactical as some of the others.
I have to look into that. I'm gonna maybe add that and see if it's something that can add value to our work. So I might hit you up later on all of this. And the growing your own is having a tangible plan for these areas. When I say onboarding process, don't even think of it as this point forward right now as like new to the organization. It could also be you can be in the organization, but maybe new to a department. You might have changed some seating around. You might have realized, or some more, some ladders have changed. So if you're going to take even if you've been in the group for 10 years, it's a new job. What's my conditions for success? The elements in place of the mentors is who's supporting in this initiative. And then what are the expectations and what's the criteria? Our collaboration support. And of course, my favorites, accountability and assessment. That's the rubber hits the road. That's the difference between, of talking about it and having something actionable. And of course, none of this will work if you don't actually have people. And the reason why we do this is the outcome is that we want a stronger workforce, not just now, but we want one prepared for tomorrow. We are shifting away from reactive being proactive. And by all means, I'm not saying this is going to replace it, but we can have both at the same time. If I had 100 seats to fill, I'd have a lot more confidence if I knew 50% of them were going to come from internal. And I'm not scrambling to find something outside. my organization. And this is the great piece, is that onboarding is how am I familiar with what to do, where to go, what to find, my expectations of practice. What are my customers? Who am I serving? Has there been a change in how we look at our work? If I'm getting evaluated on key points, am I going to know what they are beforehand? Don't assume anything. Right? And if it's not written down, your warning light should go on. You know, I heard, we talk about, ask, where do I find it? You know, this is a practice that needs to be an immediate reaction. Where can I go and look at this? All right. Without it, you're not going to be able to measure effectiveness because it changes with every time it's repeated. You're playing a telephone game in your organization on how to do the work. And it's just very frustrating. I've talked to 4 people today about a procedure for this afternoon. I got 4 different answers and I wasn't surprised. And that's all I got to communicate to folks is, does it bother me? Absolutely. Am I surprised? No, not at all. No plan. And the folks who are doing the work of helping out, it should be everybody. You know, but who picks these folks? You know, what's the criteria? Is it your best friend? Is it the one who shows up early, stays, you know, shows up early and stays late? Or is it somebody who actually, based on those expectations, demonstrated those expectations? You know, so everything kind of feeds into, feeds into each other. These are why it's a system. If I have an effective document on the onboarding of those expectations, well, that document plays into how do I pick the folks to support our staff? Well, I use the same thing. You know, so it's not, once again, of more work, it's working smarter on alignment. Clearly avoid the person who's just jumping up and back in the background. And the last thing, Nikki, I'm not sure if you want to be voluntold to do this either. I think there's a purpose to being voluntold,
Yeah.
but I don't think if I'm going to support somebody, that's because someone's telling me to do it.
Right.
You definitely, when it comes for support, the attitude, I think it's the attitude, aspirations, and the knowledge and skills are essential. If not, you're just perpetuating, problems that happen. Yeah. So this is like a list that we've used before in one of my work groups, but this list. But last thing I want you to do is take this list, copy and paste it, and put this in your handbook. That's not the intent. As this session is called, having an ongoing conversation. This is the conversation you have with your staff. What are we looking for? What are the exact behaviors? What does it look like? What does it sound like? And take the time to develop this. And just because you have, 6, 7 items on the, after this session, it's constantly evolving and changing and growing as your organization grows, as you fine tune it. But please don't copy and paste. And like I mentioned before, you look at other organizations that are doing things well, and you look at the components. What are the concepts that are being emulated that we can do? Because you got to realize that there's might be resources that you don't have that they do. So what's important? You have expectations, what we're looking for in a great coach. And this way, folks who aren't selected, they can be coached up into what's missing. But if it's not written, nobody will know where to go or what to do. And this is really fun, is the collaboration and support. Do they have what it needs to be successful? Why didn't you reach your deadline? And sometimes you have internal issues and you have external issues that might prevent barriers. As you have to ask yourself, is your barrier internal or external? And if it's external, how do we adjust with our change? I'm curious to know Because what we found in our experiences in working with organizations that we have these induction conversations is the lack of collaboration support, the barriers where it doesn't exist, isn't because of what goes on outside, but it's always an internal issue. Is that maybe scheduling wasn't addressed, or there's assumptions made by the leaders of the organization that it will get done, but without setting up situations for success. It's, once again, I'm assuming things are here. If you're familiar with backwards planning and using a logic model for evaluation, one of the most important elements, and it's usually overlooked, is a column in a logic model that talks about assumptions and resources. And everyone's all wonderful and giddy about the short-term, intermediate, and long-term outcomes. And they're positioning themselves on where they fall in their growth, but not ever going back and looking to see, before we started, do we have the right resources in place? Did we have everything that we needed to occur? So one of the things what you see here is everyone in this room, they're having conversations about these barriers. Everyone in this room is in a position of support. They've been recognized by their organizational leader to have the skills to bring on board new employees, to help retrain existing employees, and they meet regularly every month to discuss their common, the themes that are occurring, that it might have been universal, and areas of addressing and hopefully reducing gaps of collaboration. Anyone have an idea of, for those that are familiar with Gordon Ramsay, for the section accountability and assessment, what would Gordon say?
Lots of profanity.
Oh my gosh.
I was just thinking, the first thing that came in my head was just like, oh, he's scary. I want him as boss.
That's passion.
Mhm.
That he has. And if you watch a few episodes, oh my gosh, let me just take a tangent here. I got Samsung TV has a Samsung TV app with a Kitchen Nightmare channel, 24 hours of Kitchen Nightmare. And I've been talking to my mentor, who was a former director of leadership development. And I was saying, I would love to have weekly sessions with future leaders watching these episodes. Because the last thing that you want to do is have a Gordon Ramsay come in and take ownership of accountability. Because that's what he does. He shines the flashlight on it. He brings in a spotlight. And he asks the questions that people have been afraid to ask. And he's there because he wants you to do well. And people are in denial. Once again, they blame something external, but not internal that goes on. Growth, change has to occur. And in order for that to happen, you've got to have honest conversation. You can't be in denial. And here's a sign of denial, folks. When you bring up a concern that you want to change, I'm not talking personal, folks, we're talking about the work, and your organizational leaders pivot and just, well, that's fine. We're going to start new. That's a warning sign. Well, we're just going to start new. Great. Then expect it to happen again. I can guarantee it will happen again. Because the person who's supposed to be accountable is in denial that a problem exists. We're just going to start new. I'm going to getting a Gordon Ramsay t-shirt I'm going to wear on planning days to remind folks. And the best part is if you do it right, remember, accountability and assessment is not evaluation. We're not judging. We're not saying it's good or bad. We're collecting information for improvement. And I'm telling you, I'd rather have anyone in my organization to tell me what to improve than somebody on the outside. I don't want a customer telling me. I don't want a stakeholder. I don't want a partner. I want my external partner. I want the person who sits next to me. I want a culture that allows difficult, honest talk that talks about and addresses when folks lose their passion, when they're in denial, when things don't happen. You know, so it's a collaborative process. Avoid terms when you hear something, we're working behind the scenes. Have anyone heard that before?
So Rainey, let me ask you a quick question. So, you know, building accountability is certainly one of the most important things to build into your processes and how the culture works. But doesn't that also infer that you need to, you know, build a culture that accepts failure? Right?
Absolutely.
It doesn't penalize failure, because in order to be honest, people need to be able to work without fear, right, of reprisal. So if somebody makes a mistake, you know, they hide it if they're always reprimanded, if they're taking the Gordon Ramsay approach.
Absolutely.
That's a great point.
That it's, I was telling it is, it's not fear, forget fear of failure. You should fear when you fail and there's no change. That's what you fear. Fear you mess up and you still do it again. And that's the top down, Mike. You're right. It has to be from the very beginning. This is a process. Developing a culture is not an event. By all means, don't think, oh my gosh, we got the binder. We're good to go. We're good. We got a culture. It's in the book. We can look at it right here. It needs to be practice reinforced from the top down. You know, just like it's the negative, if you see the organization, the leadership, your administrative group, if you see they don't care, if you see that their passion is gone, well then, why should I have this? You know, why am I burning the fire? Same thing. When you see that this is how we do our work, we're going to fail, we're going to learn, we're going to hold each other accountable so we can improve. And what does that accountability look like? It's no more like, it's, you know, when you have, we're going to put you in documentation. That's hysterical. I tried something. It didn't work out. So I'm going to be in documentation. That's only when something's intentional. We're doing with malice or something like that. That's dysfunctional to the organization. And by all means, if you're a parent right now, this is what's so backwards about our educational system, is that we're always penalized for trying. A student receives a D on a grade and improves later on in time, that D is never erased, even though there was growth. You know, so Mike, to your point, in order for it to happen, we're looking at that fear needs to be addressed on the job. Is building the bicycle as you're riding at the same time. And call folks out on what they say to start realizing that I'm not challenging you, I'm listening. Isn't that what you want? I'm seeking to understand. So how do I know this is happening? Look for artifacts. You know, so you can actually look for a plan, and there is, from what I'm told, I will have a 75-page handbook presented to me some point in the future. I have no idea when, just not now, which is great. So we're gonna have a handbook, and maybe it's gonna have those processes and procedures in place. But what do you do after the first week, the first month, quarterly? Look for the artifacts. You know, look for our Scrum boards being organized to monitor projects. Your email is an artifact. Whether or not you get even a non-reply of an email is an artifact. And of course, looking at your calendars is an artifact. And here's one, I chose this image because there's a clock. There's an activity that we've done before. It's called a clocking activity for these long meetings. Anyone been in a meeting that's longer than, you know, an hour, like a 2-hour, 3-hour session? You know, like if you sit there, Kamar, you raised your hand.
Yeah.
Every 15 minutes, just write down what the activity is. And then you go back and you determine the level of engagement during that activity. And you kind of ask yourself, is this something that could have been done in an email? Is this the best way of collaborating and support? We just got a group of people together and face-to-face. Now we're doing this face-to-face here. Well, the purpose of getting together is what we can do things that you couldn't do on your own or in a Zoom call. Hold folks accountable. Look at what currently exists. By all means, try not to. And these elements that are here should not be an add-on. It should be part of the work. Right? So look at the tools that currently exist. And if they don't exist, you have to ask yourself, well, why not? You know, how are we monitoring and how are we improving? And what happens when you actually have a plan? When you have, and it's more than a mentoring program, you know, but I'm using that term there. It's familiar in the sense of onboarding, collaborating, support, and being accountable. California did a study in their education system and those that were involved. And we can say Broward County did something very similar and we had the same results. Those that participated, 37% retained compared to 9%. And if you have a high attrition rate, how do you think that'll affect your organization, not just 1 year, 2 years, and 3 years? By the time you get, even if it's just 10%, in 5 years, half of your organization are going to be new. How are you moving forward in culture if you're constantly changing over your employees? We currently, you know, we're living this right now. You know, we've been open for 8 years in our organization. I think there's 5 people that have been here for all 8 years. 5 people who have the history of what's been done and what hasn't been done. And what are you looking for? I think what stands out in these items of results is the word capacity. You're looking to build inside the system that you have the resources internal, the procedures internal, all right? That somebody can leave and you don't drop down to zero. This is what I mean by capacity. All right? If all of your eggs are in one basket and that person goes, if your program that you've been working on and that leader of the program has kept things tight and secure, no transparency that goes on how the work was done, and that person leaves because they're doing great things. And if they're doing great things, well, they might go on to greater things. And that may not be your own organization. They'll take it with you. Well, if it was great, you don't want it to go, that's for sure.
Randy, I wanted to tell you, because this part's really interesting to me because I love reading articles about basically the onboarding of like new employees in their first a couple months, and kind of to your point of what you've been talking about too, is that I'll drop it in chat here for everybody that's on Zoom with us, but there was an article in Inc. magazine that was written, I think in last year or the year before. And to your point was talking about mentorship was one of the most top requested things in on-the-job training for people, why they left when they realized they weren't going to get that at the new job, that was 2 of the top main things in the first 60 days why people ended up quitting. I thought that's really, really interesting.
And it's, as you were saying that, without that knowledge or understanding how the system works, it's kind of like the organization who keeps trying to find talent and not looking behind them that there's a hole in the boat. Fix the hole in the boat first, right? And by all means, this is, I love the process that Jim used for Good to Great. He interviewed successful organizations and then identified, the common themes and trends that were there. Good book to read. But keep in mind, if you have people on your bus, but you want to get them in the right seat. So by all means, don't think if someone's not doing well in this position, you hire this person for a reason. And maybe they're not doing it well because they didn't receive the right support or the capacity, whatever reason it might be, it might keep, before you say your goodbyes, this might be a different seat, different point of view, different approach. And this is the questions you have to ask yourself. This is building capacity, all right? So you've identified, Jen, you've identified as an effective employee at your organization. You coach on new people or new positions that come along here. And your administrator always picks you year after year after year. Nikki always picks you. Mike always picks you. And you're asking, well, why isn't everybody a model for this? Why is it just one? You know, is every member, and granted we have constraints and what goes on there, but the idea is these are questions you have to ask yourself. If people have to be told to be a role model, if people have to be told to do this, you might have a culture issue. Right? If nobody wants to do the job, it may not have to do with the job. I don't know yet. All right. You know, it's a concern and it's a question. So what does it look like? You know, and Mike, this is about your accountability. You know, that in order for that to occur, that element of trust, honesty, acceptance of failure, all of this is essential to moving forward. You know, there has to be some definite leadership growth, some humility that needs to go, needs to rise for this to happen. And by all means, like I'm not a fan of an example of, all right, here's a list. Have the conversation and the question. Planning takes a lot more time than the actual doing. What we did in our work is we put together a database to keep track, so a living document. Is we organized it by over the components of induction, and you'll see that if you can look at the picture on the, it's too small, on the right-hand side, we had our current reality and our desired state for each one of them. Where are we currently now? Where do we want to go? So that was the honest conversation, because everybody in the room knew about the current reality. Now we're going to be honest and write it down. Our program stinks. We don't have this. Lack of scheduling, conflicts of scheduling. So we were very, very passionate. We didn't use profanity, passionate, very hot on that current reality. Because if you're not, you'll never get to your desired state. And this way, this allowed us to pull our plan, allowed us to revise our plan, and also print certain sections that we can post in our rooms, in our offices. And by all means, call it whatever you want to call it, but focus on the concepts. You know, do you have an induction plan? You know, maybe you do. Ask yourself, you know, how are you onboarding? Is it written down? You have that tactile binder. You might just call it something different. Or maybe you have elements of it, but they're kind of disjointed yet. You haven't found your own scaffold to align your own arrows. Let's move from being people driven to plan centered. And I think whenever when you get into a new position, this might sound strange, but once you start that new position, find your replacement. Now, you may not actually find the individual, but set up and realize that as you do your amazing job in this new position you have, how are you going to share what you're doing with others? I usually refer to Batman and Robin at this point in time, and give up some of the canon stuff about Robin. Is that for those that know the mythology, eventually when Batman goes, we all know who his replacement is. It's not a big secret on whose job it is to do it. Well, when you move into an organization, are you going to be the one that's going to take your stuff with you and your work is going to drop down to zero? Or you've helped build capacity for that to occur? And that's up to you. And thanks for listening. Developing talent is a passion of mine. I love finding innovative ways to embrace new employees and existing current ones. So thanks for your time.
So
Thank you
Randy,
so much, Randy.
I do
Go
have
ahead,
one
Mike.
question. So when we were talking earlier about just what you do with Regenerate, right, and about the pipeline for underprivileged and at-risk, high school students to give them skills, you made a comment about not the middle school level, but I'm wondering where that how do you build that pipeline, right? So one of our goals as part of Tech Hub and the Talent Committee is really to to get even K through 8, right, excited about STEM, right? So that they go, we're looking at, going into schools and presenting from different companies to get them excited so that they can get into programs like yours. But how do you build that pipeline, and how do you get the candidates interested?
And you have to look at, it's a good question because there's a lot of K through 8 stuff, and I knew I was going to open up a Pandora's box with that. And I've taught elementary, I've taught middle, I taught high school, I taught college and district folks that are there. And my point was there's this knee-jerk reaction, okay, that we're working with high school students, and it's like, oh, well, then maybe we should just keep on exposing them earlier. And the exposing them earlier is my red light, Mike, is where's the follow-up with it? If all you're going to do is expose them to this, and it's a one and done, a checkbox, just don't do it. Just don't. Have a better plan. For the elementary and to get into STEM, I would focus on the early, middle and elementary, submerge them in a culture of creating.
Mm-hmm.
The focus with that group of kids, reading, writing, knowledge, basic math, computation, science, concepts of social studies. Focus on that, and a good educator will bring aboard the technology tools to create. And by that, if you're creating, let them get excited about creating, and then you'll find this natural progression that exists into careers that happens. Because what they're seeing is that my software architects, what do? They're creating. They're looking at problems. So it can happen. We're going to use technology as a way to create, collaborate, share, grow, and learn. And then we're going to use technology with the same elements, but I'm going to pivot a little bit. Instead of, for example, reading to learn, like we do in elementary, we say there's 2 parts. First, we read to learn, and then we learn to read, then we read to learn. So let's get our kids first learning to read and use technology to build on reading and writing. Then we can have some design thinking conversations, all right, using computer science and data science on problem solving for our students, problems that they currently exist in their own lives. And then you'll see the connections from how can I use tech and design thinking to our career. Hope that answered your question.
I have a question. So I run a startup here in North Miami, and thank you for that presentation. It was very useful. But there are a lot of things that might have a different perspective in terms of startup when it comes to expertise, resources, mentorship, and especially being a young founder. When you hire someone who's like 15 years older than you, So those are a lot of questions that are revolving. It might be a little off topic, but can you touch a little bit on that, on how to tackle those scenarios?
If I understand correctly, Kumar, your question is how to move forward with this type of culture when you're brand new?
When you're brand new and when you're young and you also don't have the right expertise to coach the other people that you're hiring, because you may not have someone with that expertise. They might be the first one coming. I'm so glad you mentioned this, is that first of all, don't wait for perfection, right? Or if you wait for perfection, you'll never ever happen. We call it like getting hung up in committees or something like that. Okay, we're just going to keep cycling our wheels. That's there. If you effectively communicate your vision and your mission, your values, those core concepts, and you start recruiting people, you start connecting to people who share those values with you. All right, that like-mindedness. And by all full well, when you're having these conversations, we're starting a new program at a new school, and I am when it comes to the knowledge and skills of the work, I'm not even on the ladder. I'm like on the other side of the room. Okay, that's there. But we make it very clear. We are empowering you to build the bicycle and ride at the same time. There is no blueprint. Let's create the blueprint. Instead of worrying about it, get behind it and get excited that you're creating something. And everyone involved is going to be part of this.
how empowering is that? We don't have to follow somebody. We don't do it somebody else's way. Let's make it our way.
Yeah.
Right. So look at that as an advantage, and not as, you know, as a disability or a deficit of what you have to overcome. You've just eliminated all the problems that you don't want, especially with someone that comes in there with years of experience.
Yeah, just from experience, Kumar, I was also in your shoes at one point in my career. I started a company when I was very young, and I started bringing people in, you know, and as a startup and as a founder, you wear many hats, right? Many hats that you didn't get in your traditional schooling. So when you bring those people in, the one thing you can do is you set the bar for the culture, right? And how you manage and how you interact with everybody, and how you want the direction of the company to go. So as long as you're clear, and to Randy's point, you have a clear mission, you have clear values, and those are communicated. No matter how senior those people are to you, they may end up being your best mentor, but you're driving that culture.
Great point, Mike.
Thank you. That was a very good point. Thank you, Randy, also.
Yeah, I thought that was great, Mike, too. And I was going to add to that. I think that, you know, I mean, I feel like just naturally, Kumar, even when you were talking, immediately, just like imposter syndrome just popped up in my head. And I feel like naturally a lot of people have that, but it's just that I think as long as you, like Mike was saying, as long as you set the foundation for the culture and you know what your strengths and weaknesses are, I think a lot of new startup founders look for people that think and act and everything the way that they do. But I think as long as you know what your strengths and weaknesses are, then looking for the people that have, you know, the opposite of you, looking for because you obviously don't need a ton of you need people to fill those gaps. So I think, you know, Mike, that really made a lot of sense, that I think as long as you have the basis and the foundation for the culture and you look for people that can kind of fill your gaps, that I think everything just kind of, it'll come together as long as you have that as like a foundation.
Right.
There's a question from Wilson. What is it, making open time to just play? Are you referring to like the Genius Hour? I'm referring to that question.
Not sure the context of the question. Yeah.
All right. Anyone familiar with the Genius Hour that goes on? Is dedicating an hour of time, if I remember this correctly, dedicating an hour of time where your members of your organization can pursue their passion projects, and absolutely encourage all of that. You might actually find that those passion projects are aligned to the mission and values that your organization has, that exists. You definitely do not want to squelch aspirations of your faculty, your staff. You want to, you know, create the opportunities when they arrive, that they want to stay. They feel welcome, they feel loved, they feel supported, that their ideas are valued, and that you're going to provide time for their ideas on the job. They're like, oh, that's great. Go ahead, work on it and come back to me. No. We're going to, if we evaluate, we're going to put it where we can work on this. All right, and we're going to make time for it. I hope that's what you're referring to. And let me tell you, I did that with my other hat as a school teacher. My students were completely in shock when I told them they were driving their curriculum. I gave them a Genius Hour a while ago, something similar that we called it. And the students like, you mean I can design my own hotel? And, you know, it's like, what? And I'm like, well, of course. But then the next few steps was facilitating the learning and the guiding and the research that goes into the play. I'm just not going to design without some knowledge and skills. And what did become of it? Well, actually, that student who was the first one, she registered her own company with the state of Florida 2 weeks ago, and she has her own startup of a social media company, because maybe somebody led her at one point to have experience of starting something from scratch. I'll take full credit for that.
I think that's really cool. And you made me think of something else too, Randy. And I think you and I might have talked about this before, but I think that sometimes people preach or want people to become entrepreneurs. And sometimes we forget about entrepreneurs, that there's people that can be creative within a company, like you were saying, that support the company and what the company's doing. If you allow, like Mike was saying earlier, that room for failure and learning. Because I think sometimes we don't educate people enough about, that there are opportunities to be an entrepreneur within a company and supporting there, because not everybody wants to own their own business either, but you can still be creative and support the company that you love and being an entrepreneur.
And if you don't provide that culture or that time, then you lose the ability for innovative solutions,
Exactly.
right? For different approaches.
And which is why it is important that the organizations come up with their own criteria. What does collaboration support look like? So do not do internet searches and do plug and play programs. Developing an induction plan, developing your talent is a conversation. It is not a cut and paste, because if that wasn't articulated, Nikki, about having opportunities to foster that creativity, that is collaboration support. As you mentioned, the article that you shared, folks might hit the door. They don't feel supported.
I have another question. So you mentioned during your presentation that hire for attitude and aspiration and keep that as your priority during the probation. And then there's another dilemma that I always have while I'm going through all the resumes for hiring is, do I make the priority to attitude, the culture, and the aspiration, or the skills and knowledge that I need for the development of the startup? Well, everyone keeps on saying that skills and knowledge can be learned. Of course, it can be learned, but that comes with it hurts the development of the startup at some point as well, because they're not that, maybe they're not that experienced in the work they have to do. So that's a dilemma I always have. Which one to prioritize is the question.
I think what you need to be aware of is what's available, okay? And we're not saying is, yes, in a perfect world, I would always love to hire the attitude and aspirations and have the luxury to skill up and train on the job and all of that. But we know it's not perfect. And sometimes, we have to address things on the fly and, we get who we have. All right. They're not beating down our doors. And if that's the case, have those conditions that now, if the right attitude's not there, how do you cultivate? How do you change the attitude? How do you support it? Because this is a person that you admire, respect, has a knowledge and skills, but isn't a team player on willing to work with another member of the team. Just rather work in isolation. All right, as a leader, you have a goal. Randy, who likes to work by himself, at the end of the year, you want Randy to be leading a team and being part of a team. What's the action plan? What are the steps? What are the conditions of support? What are the not sink or swim, but because I want Randy to stay, how are we going to modify and change that behavior over time?
Right, and there is a certain aspect of that, right? Your company's going to morph over time. There are certain requirements that you need today that you may not need long-term.
Mm-hmm.
So there's also the aspect of using temporary worker contractors for that stuff as well, because that affects. There's a great book out there by Patrick Lencioni called The Ideal Team Player. And he talks about hiring, it's based on a fictional thing, but he's talked about hiring, and there's 3 criteria, right? Smart, not only technically smart for the skills that you need, but how to operate within a team and talk to people. Humble, right? Not out for himself, but wants to do things for the right reasons. And somebody that's hungry, somebody that wants to learn and wants to participate and wants to be. And those 3 virtues, he talks about how to look for them, how to build them in your organization. So that may be something to help in that aspect.
So is there a direct answer to which one to prioritize, attitude and aspiration, or skills and knowledge, or is it a non-answerable question?
I think it might be is you may not have a priority depending on what what's available. I think what you have to do is have a system of balance checks, have a system of support, whichever role whoever you bring on board.
Right.
Sometimes you can't select who you bring. I mean, you ultimately do, but if it's a choice of nothing or something, it's like, all right, I can mold this. It's workable. They're coachable.
Well, and the question too is right now, do you have a deliverable to your investors that you have to get there? So you need the development skills to get it done, right? Then you worry less about those other aspects now. And then hopefully you can, again, have them work to whatever culture you want. If not, then you move on. So, I mean, remember, this isn't personal, this is business. So it all depends on where you are in your growth as a company.
Right.
Mike, you sound like Gordon Ramsay. It's not personal, it's business.
It's not my first rodeo either.
Thank you. This was helpful.
Yeah, and I say, Randy, so I'm just keeping track of time. We're about 5 minutes over, which I was completely fine with. I think this was a great conversation. So I just wanted to see if there was any last minute questions or comments here, just because I want to, obviously try to keep to time as best as we can. And then of course, Randy, if there's anything that you have that maybe could be sent out, either this slide or a one page or any information, I'm happy to get that out to anybody that was here or that registered maybe couldn't attend.
Okay, I'll send that to you. And while I have the floor, let me introduce Sue Colton, who is signed up, that's here. You see her. Sue Colton is one of my mentors. She was instrumental in my development process of learning about talent development. Author, director, of leadership development of the 6th largest school district in the nation, and retired principal and educator, and a good friend.
Welcome, Sue. Glad to have you.
Thank you. And Randy gets it. Randy gets it. And it's important to, surround yourself with people. And I love the Patrick Lencioni concept of those 3 areas, being hungry, being ready to learn, being eager, having knowledge and having the opportunity, and someone who is leading the culture that allows that safe environment and that risk-taking to take place.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, Randy, do you have any final closing words for us as we close this out?
I think if you're not having fun, do something else. This is an empowering process. It is not. It should be exciting, and it should be work. It should reduce your waste, and it should clear the air. So have fun with it.
Thank you, Randy. I saw a thumbs up from Mike, so I think that was a good closing comment there. So thank you, and thank you everybody for attending. Kumar, you had some great questions as well. Like I said, if there's anything you want to send over, Randy, I'm happy to get that out to everybody. And then this recording will be up on YouTube, so we'll make sure to get that out to everybody also. But thank you guys for attending, and hopefully I'll see you guys soon.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Good seeing you.